everybody, it is Dean Z, and I am doing the third and final installment of reviewing some applications of people whose LSAT and GPA were at or above our medians, all of whom applied early in the cycle, like in September, and all of whom were denied rather than waitlisted or admitted. So, and I'm breaking down what went wrong. And as I mentioned in the other two episodes, I'm concentrating on examples of things that are things that could have been fixed and changed, as opposed to, things that are baked in that you don't really have any control over. Because I want to illustrate for you how much control you actually have in making a successful application. All right, so let's get started without any further ado. Okay, so our first person today is a 2026 grad. So that means it's someone who necessarily has a little bit less work experience. So that is something that is written in stone for this applicant. But still, they could have, there are things they could have done. So first off, I will just note that in their LSAT essay, and we'll get to this more in a future candidate here, there were some spelling and grammar issues. And I don't know, I honestly don't know how people are thinking about LSAT essays these days. When I first started in this job, LSAT essays were handwritten, they were indecipherable. People in my job rarely put any weight on them. Sometimes faculty would be very interested in them, but I would always look at them, but assuming they passed a pretty low bar, that was all I did with it. But now they are typed, now the prompts are a lot more interesting and a lot better, and I think people are spending more time looking at them. So I would say don't blow it off. You should never have blown it off, even in the olden days, because it was always very obvious if someone wrote one sentence and moved on. But it is particularly likely in this day to kind of bite you if you are rushing through it and not putting any thought into it. So I'd say take it seriously, because it's often one of the first things people look at when they're flipping through your application. And so if you start out with some big errors, people will notice. Okay, so in this application, the resume, as I mentioned, the person's a 2026 grad, so there's not going to be a lot of work experience here. But they start out by flip-flopping their schools. So they went to one school and then transferred to another school. And they put the first school on their resume as the school that they transferred from, and the second school is the school that they are going to be graduating from. And that is confusing because it looks like they went to the top school. The top school is usually the one that you'd have the degree from. So number one, this is just like, okay, so that little mistake suggests to me that this is someone who is not really familiar with writing a resume, which would go along with the lack of work experience. And then when I said lack of work experience, I really mean it. This person has a page and a half of, extracurricular activities, I'll call them, groups that they are a part of, and they use multiple bullet points for each of them. They are, they don't tell me how many hours they're working for them. It is not, a couple of them are clearly one-off activities, like planning a race, say, or something like that, like not something that is every week. So, but they're listing it as if it's an ongoing commitment. So they are, and it's almost a 2-page resume. So it's both a lack of content and really puffing it up, and yet going on quite a long way. So, and then in addition to the extracurriculars, then it was there's something for off-campus experience, they say, and it is all either volunteer work or time spent abroad. So literally no jobs, like not one, which obviously you're not going to have full-time post-grad work if you're applying straight from undergrad. But if you're applying straight from undergrad and you haven't had any work, I would just strongly encourage you to not apply in that year. You really need to have done, over the summer or over the school year. It doesn't have to be full-time. It doesn't have to be for a year or anything like that, but you should do something, right? And this person has done nothing. And like I say, went on at great length about that. And then the essays are a problem. So the writing is awkward and doesn't really convey anything of interest. Starts off with the classic, I like to argue thing, and that's why I want to be a lawyer. And when I say classic, I don't mean that in a good way. I mean that it's kind of almost a joke example of what people do wrong in a personal statement. It's rare that you see someone say, like, I want to go to law school because I like to argue, or my parents told me I should go to law school because I like to argue. It's rare that you actually see it. People often give it as an example of what not to do. This person actually did it. So, yeah, so that's not good. And then the rest of the essay is very hard for me to sum up about what's wrong with it because it just is jumping all over the place. We're talking about authors, we're talking about her father, we're talking about what she was like when she was young, and so on and so forth. And then she sort of throws in 3 sentences about what she wants to do with a law degree that is completely unconvincing. So it just doesn't tie into any of the other things she's talked about. And then she has an essay about why she transferred. You'll remember that I said in her resume, she starts out with the school that she transferred from instead of the school that she's actually getting her degree from. And so she has an essay about why did she transfer, and it just doesn't make any sense at all. And it is hard for me to explain the degree to which it doesn't make sense without saying something about the schools that she transferred from and went to. But she's talking about the school she transferred from, she says, has a certain kind of culture, and she wanted the kind of culture of the place that she transferred to. Just so happens that I know the 2 schools pretty well. In the school she transferred to, the description of the culture definitely applies to that one. So it just doesn't make any sense. It's completely unconvincing. And the tricky thing is, the first school that she went to, she did very poorly at, and she said it's because she didn't like the culture, and then she did much better at the other school. But it's also the case that the school she transferred from is a very challenging school academically, and the school she transferred from is less so. So I feel like in the absence of a better explanation, what my guess is that place was really hard. And so you went to a different school that was a little less hard. And yeah. So maybe don't give an explanation at all if it's not a good explanation. So, you choose the topics of your essays and you have to think, like, is this a strong topic? Am I making a strong case? And she just really wasn't. And then finally, she did another essay, which is talking about her family life. And it really gives the impression that she is very much still thinking about her family life, like very affected by it in a not, like she's working through some stuff from her family life growing up, which honestly, I think we all are. But reading it, it sounds like it's very fresh. It is very raw. It is, again, it is not, she's not picked a good topic here. It is not reflecting well on her or her maturity or her agency or anything else. And so she just picked really weak topics and then didn't execute particularly well. Okay, and I forgot to say the exact LSAT and GPA. I will say she was actually at our medians on both numbers, so identical. So yeah, that's that. Moving on. Okay, next we have someone who, the LSAT and GPA, it's another 180 and almost 4.0. So we know that the numbers were not the problem per se in not getting admitted here. He took the LSAT 3 times, but actually it was a pretty reasonable decision to do that. And so no shade that I am throwing on that decision. And this is someone who graduated 2 years ago. So let's see what they have been up to. Not much, despite 2 years out. So this person's current job is doing, they formed their own company and they do marketing work. And they say they're the founder of their own company for which they do marketing for other companies, but they do not give me any kind of metrics to let me know how successful this is, how many hours a week this consumes, what they are actually doing, who their clients are, do they have a focus on the kind of marketing they're doing, that sort of thing. So it talks about it, gives me some bullet points, but very, very broad terms. So like responsible for hiring and managing employees while delegating tasks to ensure quality deliverables and client satisfaction. That is not a helpful bullet point. And the interesting thing is, so this job, this company that they have created during college, this company created during college and is carried on afterwards. But during college, they had some really, really good internships and law-related internships, working for a law firm, working for a federal government entity, working for a real estate company. So doing some really good work. And, I'd just be curious why none of those panned out into post-grad jobs, which, to be fair, I don't think there's any really good way to convey that, but it is a question mark that I have here. I think that I could feel a lot better about this company that has been founded, though, if I had a better sense of what was going on with it and whether it really truly was a full-time undertaking. And maybe he could have an essay saying, like, I chose to do this rather than work in a company because of blah, blah, blah. But that question doesn't get answered. So, and then he lists one volunteer experience, and as with the other candidate, it's the kind of experience where it's like a one-off. It's like an event, like say like a dance marathon or something like that, and that's it. So that's not a very impressive bit of volunteer work. Does mention a scholarship and tells me what it's for, so points for that. And then lists, and misses a trick here because lists 1, 2, 3 different groups that he was a part of during college, but doesn't say, and it just tells the names of the groups, doesn't tell when he was involved, doesn't say for how long, doesn't say how much time it consumed, doesn't say what his role was in the group rather. So you might as well just leave that off. And then, I've talked about my question marks about this company that he founded. The personal statement is all about one of his summer jobs. I said he had some really good summer jobs. So he talks about this summer job, which is, which is not the field he ended up pursuing. So I'd rather know about what he's actually doing. And also the job, the way he describes it, he just talks about one incident at work that had to do with like a system, like a software system kind of, that he fixed. And it is just not interesting. Like there's no other people involved. There's no, it's just a very boring story, to be very frank. And again, it's not clear to me what that has to do with what he's doing right now and why he's doing that instead of this job full time that he wrote about. And then he writes no other essays. So heating it in, this is just really boring. This is just a really boring application. So nothing wrong with it. The writing is fine technically and so on and so forth, but I'm just not learning anything from this candidate that makes me think I want them here. So yeah, that didn't work out. Next, we have a fun one. I mentioned in the first one that we were going to talk a little bit more about LSAT essays, and that's what the problem was here, believe it or not. It's the very rare example of an application where there's just like one wrong thing. Everything else seems fine. LSAT is at our median. GPA is just a hair above our median. Good undergraduate school, fine majors, graduated a year ago, has some good work experience working in the government. So everything, superficially is looking great. The LSAT sample, I just didn't even know what to make of it, to be very honest. Here's how it reads. The first sentence is, I believe, should say, despite advancements in agriculture, transportation, and storage, food insecurity remains all too real. Only instead it says agrugculture, agrugculter, transportation is spelled right, storage is spelled SOTRAGE, insecurity is spelled INSACUIRTY, so insecurity remains all too real. So all the words are all spelled right. So it's like, what's happening here? Why are these words, some of these words, spelled so terribly incorrectly? It's not like a typo, it's like just crazy misspellings, but not every word. Like, I feel like transportation, if you're going to misspell a word, that could be a misspelled word, but that one's perfect. And then it just goes on like that. Like, many of the words are spelled correctly, and then, like, here's another one. Actually, I don't even know what this is supposed to be. Values such as cultural, I don't know, signogrants. I don't know what that should be. Cultural is spelled it was agricultural above was spelled wrong, and now cultural is spelled wrong again, but in a whole new wrong way. And then signogrants, I don't know, it goes on like that. Like, you can't even piece it together. But then it's like a couple sentences will be completely normal. So I don't know what's happening here because, like, obviously this person is smart, and obviously it's like, are they pranking me? Like, what's happening? And I actually thought about reaching out to ask what's going on, but I couldn't figure out what they could say that would make me feel okay. So I decided I couldn't ask. And then, the essays that he wrote are actually quite good. And I don't think these are, I think you'd say now in 2026, like, oh, they must have used AI to write it, but I don't think that's the case. It just does not look like an AI essay. Like, maybe he used AI to fix it, but I don't think it could have been the basis for generating it just based on the language, and it's like it's got particular details, and it's a good essay. Yeah, and then okay, yes, and then the last thing was I looked at the letters of recommendation very closely on this one because I thought, well, maybe they'll say something that would help shed some light. And one of the things I note is that both of the letters of rec were written not to law schools, but with regard to a job application. So I didn't quite know what to make of that, but that it also meant that they weren't telling exactly what I wanted to know, and they weren't very strong. They spent one paragraph. They both spent like one paragraph talking about how they know them, one paragraph talking about what the course taught, and then said that they think he'll be successful. So like pretty understated. But then the third letter came from his job, and it talks about how good he is at writing, further complicating my confusion about this LSAT essay. But I throw that out there to again emphasize, please don't just blow off your LSAT essay. And I also want to emphasize, it was an extremely bad essay. It wasn't like there were some mistakes in it. It was like extremely bad. So this is the rare example where you can do something sufficiently badly that all the rest of your work is for naught. But that is extremely rare. So it has to be quite dramatic for that to happen. All right. The fourth and final example is someone with an almost perfect GPA and an LSAT of 174. And this person gives off a real sense of someone who is wanting a job and isn't finding one and wants to go to law school, which is fine, but you don't want to appear for that to be the case. So you want to try to address more about why law school if that's the situation you are in. So why do I say that? So first of all, they have like a little designation of certification after their name. So they say their name is Mary Smith, then afterwards there's like a series of letters, ABC, CFP, PBA, and it's a designation of a industry kind of certification. Industry that is not law, so it's not like certified paralegal or something like that. It is a completely different industry. So that, to me, like why, maybe they're putting on there because they think like this is impressive, but I wouldn't put it right as part of your name at the top of your resume, because then you're really highlighting it and it's not on point. So if you want to show that you have the wherewithal to get a certification, I'd put it under interests or skills or something like that. Not interests, but skills somewhere at the bottom of the resume, or perhaps in connection with one of the jobs that you had if it's in that field. But I wouldn't highlight it up at the top. And in fact, he not only puts it at the top of the resume, also puts it in under education, and also puts it in under community. So he really wants you to know about this certification that has nothing to do with anything. Okay. Graduated in 2024, so 2 years ago, and is currently working in 2 jobs, one as an LSAT tutor and one as a sporting coach. And the sport is a sport that he did in college and seems to have done very successfully based on everything that he says about the sport under education. So that's fine, right? That's pretty normal profile. However, intriguingly, he had a job in this field for which he had a certification for a year after college. Or I guess it's 9 months, math. He did it for 9 months and then started doing these other 2 jobs instead. And never explains what happened. Never explains, certainly can't say that on the resume, but never in the essay does he say why he left the job that is in the field that he has the certification in that he apparently wants to pursue. And his essay is all about his job, this 9-month job, and it talks about one particular incident at the job where he solved a problem, and it is incomprehensible because it is all full of jargon. It is all about like the ins and outs of this industry about which I know nothing. Highly technical page and a half that I could not tell you what it was about, even though I've read it 3 times now. And then he also does include a half-page additional essay where he's talking about a time he helped a teammate in this sport that he is in, someone who is struggling, and he gave him some advice. Again, that one's more comprehensible to me, but doesn't give any interesting details, and really just, just is not presenting him in any way that would make you think, oh, this is an interesting person to have in the class. So another one that didn't get in. So there you go. Those are examples. I hope there's something in there for you. And among the 12 that I have highlighted, where people left a lot of things wanting, that I hope that there's some guidance in there for those of you who are working on how to present yourselves in your application materials. And I'll just add, today I was speaking with someone who does admissions in a different industry, and she was just talking about what they, some things they look for in that industry in admissions that are sort of, you have to show this. And I don't think in law school that there are very many characteristics where I feel like we really require that you show this. But it does point to the idea that think about what about you what are your character traits that you think a law school would really be interested in, that would serve you well as a lawyer or serve you well as a student in a law school, and think about how to convey those. Like, all of these essays are just telling stories that are either boring stories or illustrating things about the person that aren't helpful. So choose your topics carefully, because you can do a lot with this real estate of essays, or you could fail to. So, okay. Like I say, hope that's useful. Grammar for today, that and who. This gets misused a lot. So when you are talking about a person, you have to say who. You can't say that. That is for things and for animals. And when we're talking about people, we like to call them whos. So I don't say, this is Dustin, I might say, who is the man who films my videos for the A2Z series. Who, right? I don't say, this is Dustin, that is the man. It's a who. He's a who. My cat is a that, much as I love him. And maybe I'd say who for him, because he's my special cat. But it would be grammatically correct to just call him a that. So, but it is definitely kind of rude to call a human a that instead of a who. Was that helpful at all? Did that make any sense? I don't know. I hope that Dustin has cut out the 30 seconds where I just froze in my panic about not being able to come up with a sentence. So that'll make me look a little bit better if you cut that out. But anyway, I hope that is something you can use. And actually, I guarantee if you keep this in mind, you will hear bad examples all the time. People get it wrong all the time. And I'm a little obsessed with it. Okay. I think that's enough for the day. Thanks, as always, for bearing with me in my inability to come up with good grammar examples. And wherever you go, go blue.